So now we're going to be looking at our factoring video 1. So it says, recall from your math past, what is a GCF? Well, remember GCF stands for greatest common factor. All right, so greatest common factor. So how do you find your GCF? Well, let's look at 9 and 15. Let's take a look. Our calculator can help us identify factors of a number. And then we can use those factors to identify our greatest common factor. So if we turn our calculator on and you go to New Document. Okay, so if you turn your calculator on and you go to New Document, do you want to save? Say no. Go to Add Calculator. So if you hit the menu button and go down to Number, and you can do number 3, factor. So menu, number, factor, we'll type in number 9. If you look, it gives us a 3 squared. So if we have 3 squared, whatever that exponent number is, that tells us that how many of those numbers we're going to have. So in this case, we'll have 3 times 3. So let's do the same thing, but for 15. So menu, number, factor, and this time we'll type in 15 and then press enter. And in this case, we get 3 times 5. So if we look, these are our factors. We have to compare what appears more than once. So in this case, we have a 3 and a 3. So our GCF is going to be 3 for 9 and 15. So that was the simple thing, back what we did probably middle school, elementary school. But now let's factor a trinomial. So you want to take each of them and put them in the top, or if you make a chart, we're going to break up each of the terms. So we have 3x squared, we have 9x, and we have 15. So we take our calculator and we use it for what we just did with the leading coefficient. So we'll do menu, number, factor. We'll type in 3. Well, they only gave me back 3, so that means my number is 3. But now we need to also break down the x squared. The exponent means the same thing as what we talked about up here. 3 squared means that we have 2 3's. X squared means that we have 2 x's. So let's factor our 9. So we have menu 2, 3, and let's type in 9. It's a 3 squared. Sorry if you can't see that. 3 squared. So that means we have 2 3's. Our exponent for the x is just a 1, so that means we have 1x. Now let's factor our 15. So menu 2, 3, type in 15. We have 3 times 5. So what do each of our columns share? Well, if you look, there is a 3 in each column. That means that my GCF is going to be 3. So then as you write your GCF expression, you're going to put your GCF on the outside, and then you write your trinomial with what's left. So down here, you have an x squared for your first term. You have plus 3x, and then you have plus 5. So that's your factored expression so far with the GCF. All right, so let's turn to the back. We have a couple more examples we can do. Let's look at example 2. So factor the GCF of 4x cubed minus 24x squared plus 12x. So we have 3 terms, so draw a chart. We'll do 4x cubed minus 24x squared, and then we have 12x. So let's factor each of the leading coefficients. So menu 2, 3, we stick in the 4, we get 2 squared. So that means that we have 2 times 2. It's x cubed, so we have 3 x's. 1, 2, 3. And I'm saying multiply in between there because x cubed means that you're doing x times x times x. Now let's do negative 24. Oh. Type in negative 24. You get negative 1 times 2 to the third. So that means we have 3 2's. 1, 2, 3, and then times 3. We have an x squared, so that means we have 2 x's. And then we need to factor the 12. So menu 2, 3, we type in 12. We get 2 squared times 3, so we have 2 2's and a 3. And then we have x. So what do each of them share? Well, if we look, they each have a 2. If you re-look at it, they each have a second 2. And then they also share an x. So when you figure out your GCF, it's going to be 2 times 2, which is 4, times x, which is 4x, is your GCF. So your GCF expression would be that you write 4x on the outside, parentheses, and then you do x. Then you write down what's left in each column. So x times x would be x squared. Negative 1 times 2 times 3. If you don't know what that is, you can type it into your calculator, but you get minus 6x. And then in your last one, you have a 3, so plus 3. Okay? So let's try one more. Example number 3. And if you don't like drawing the chart, maybe a little shorter way is you just draw the chart right here. If you want more space though, go ahead and type it the other way or write your whole chart. So menu 2, 3, we type in negative 2, we get that that is negative 1 times 2. X squared means that we have 2 x's. Menu 2, 3, we do negative 3. You get that it's negative 1 times 3, and we have 1x. Then menu 2, 3, and we type in negative 8. So it's negative 1 times, oh, can you see that? Sorry. Make sure there's no glare, but there's a glare. It's 2 to the third power. So we would have 2 times 2 times 2. So let's find our GCF. If we look, they each have a negative 1. 2, there's no 2 here, there's no x's, so our GCF is just a negative 1. And sometimes that'll happen where you have to factor out that negative 1. So then what you're left with, you have a negative 1. 2 times x is 2x squared. 3 times x is plus 3x. And then 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. So if you look, it's the same thing you started with. You've just factored out that negative 1. So everything has changed signs. Let's try our last one, example 4. So if we draw our chart and we factor our coefficients, so if we do menu 2, 3 of 6, we get 2 times 3. And we have 3 x's. If you factor 3, you get that it's just 3. And we have 2 x's. And then if you factor negative 15, you get negative 1 times 3 times 5. And we have an x. So if we take what everybody shares, it looks like we have a 3 and we have an x. So your GCF is going to be 3x, and then what's left, you have 2x squared plus x minus 5, because negative 1 times 5 is minus 5. So then you look and see, well, GCF has to be correct, so it can't be A, can't be C, can't be D. Looking, it has to be B.